Okay, let's turn to Antony and Cleopatra. And in fact, let's turn to page 117. Mark Antony. This is Act 4, Scene 14. We'll pick up a line around line 3. Sometime we see a cloud that's dragonish, of vapors, sometime like a bear or lion, a towered citadel, a pendant rock, a forked mountain or blue promontory with trees upon it that nod unto the world and mock our eyes with air. Thou hast seen these signs, they are black vespers pageants. Ay, my lord, that which is now a horse, even with a thought the racked its limbs and makes it indistinct as water is in water. It does, my lord. Now, in the bad quarto of Antony and Cleopatra, at this point, Eros says in the text, my noble master, what art thou smoking? And can I get some of it? There is no bad quarto. This is a very weird moment, and that's why I want to begin with this. Antony is weirded out here. He is freaking out. This does not happen to Coriolanus. This does not happen in the Roman Republic in its early days. This is the further cracking of that roof of Rome here. And this is poetry now. Now we get that famous poetry that Shakespeare's plays are known for. In fact, if you know Hamlet, there's a very similar scene about clouds there, when Hamlet is looking at the clouds changing in the skies. This is very lyrical. It's very beautiful poetry, the talk of black vespers pageants. But it's pretty weird. Even Eros doesn't know what to say here. And this is what happens in the empire now. This is my first indication to you of a new dimension of life that's opening up in the empire, and it's something we associate with lyric poetry. It reflects the sense that the world as we know it is dissolving away. And these are indeed the musings of a defeated man here, who sees the world dissolving because his whole life is dissolving. Further down he says, here I am Antony, yet cannot hold this visible shape. I'll especially stress the lines, and makes it indistinct as water is in water. In Antony's vision, the whole world has become nebulous. It's like a world of clouds, and one thing is dissolving into another as water is in water. Water becomes very powerful poetic symbolism in this play. There's a major shift here from warfare on land to warfare at sea. And Antony's soldiers beg him, fight at land, on land. That's what a Roman does. But the sense of fighting at sea comes to prevail in the play, and indeed, the characters in this play are at sea. They don't have the old guideposts anymore. Things are becoming indistinct as water is in water. They have a sense of having lost their way. In the old republic, you had nice roads marked out with guideposts, the famous Roman mile. And indeed, this kind of imagery in Antony and Cleopatra is very characteristic now of a world of Eros. Indeed, we got a character here named Eros. He's in the source, so Shakespeare didn't completely make it up, but he must have been delighted when he found that name in Plutarch. Eros, most fundamentally manifesting itself as the sexual impulse, is the desire to merge with something else. Thumos, we saw, was drawing the line in the sand. Thumos wants sharp boundaries. The thumotic man distinguishes himself sharply from someone else. Therefore, characteristically, the imagery in Coriolanus is of sharp boundaries. I'll give you some page references so you can look it up. But on page 133 of our edition, which would be Act 5, Scene 3, about line 65, what is Coriolanus like in women? Icicles. the noble sister of Publicola, the moon of Rome, chaste as the icicle that's curtained by the frost from pure snow. This doesn't sound very erotic to most of us. Don't want to merge with an icicle. But Coriolanus' vision is of things that are frozen hard. Earlier in the play, page 9, it comes up in his contempt for the plebeians. So this would be Act 1, Scene 1, about line 175. You can look it up. When he condemns them, he says, "You are no surer no than is the coal of fire upon the ice or hailstone in the sun." Things that melt earn Coriolanus' a special contempt. He doesn't like melting things. He's the thumatic man who likes everything to be marked with boundaries. And that seems to be the theme of Republican Rome. Comitius, this is on page 75, if you want to look it up eventually. That makes it Act 3, Scene 1, about line 205 in Coriolanus. Comitius says, that is the way to lay the city flat, to bring the roof to the foundation. Again, Rome actually has a roof, and it has strong foundations in the Republic, and bury all which yet distinctly ranges in heaps and piles of ruin. Comitius' vision of the city is that things distinctly range. This is a world of distinctions, class distinctions, for example, the distinction between Roman and Volsci. Coriolanus loves a world of distinctions. Shows his thumos. He wants everything to be separate. Antony and Cleopatra is a world of merger. Everything starts to blend together, and that's connected to the fact that it's a world of eros. When I first mentioned the connection between thumos and republic in this class, one of you came up to me after and says, "Does that mean that the empire is connected to eros?" And the answer is yes. And Julius Caesar gave us the formula: fat men and lean men. Lean men are for a republic. Fat men are for an empire. That is, Julius Caesar understood, what do you want to encourage if you want to be the single ruler of a city? You want to discourage thumos. You want to discourage ambition, spiritedness, everything that will lead other people to contend for your throne. And what do you want to encourage? Epicureanism, desire, appetite. You want people like Menenius, not Coriolanus. You want people like Mark Antony, not Cassius. The Republic is a land of lean, thumatic men. The ideal of the empire is a land of fat, erotic men who will be diverted from politics by their other appetites. They will be satisfied by something other than politics. Julius Caesar understands that, and as I think Shakespeare shows in this play, the empire stacks the deck against thumos and in favor of eros. I'll remind you that the central idea of this course is the regime, or what's called in Greek the politeia. That's also a word that means constitution in Greek. It's also, Plato's Republic is called politeia. The name of that book in Greek is politeia. And the idea of the regime that you find in Plato and Aristotle is that a formal government shapes human beings, that the disposition of offices, the constitution, the way the political community is set up encourages a certain kind of human being at the expense of others. And indeed, I'm saying that Shakespeare's project, if you will, as a dramatist. If you want to see a fully political man, he's in effect saying, if you want to see the pure warrior, you're going to have to go to the Roman Republic. You're not going to find such a man in a monarchy, or at least not as likely. And indeed, what he's looking at in these plays is how a shift in regime changes the character of human beings. I'd love to be put in charge of a production, the three plays, where I could have the same character play Coriolanus and Mark Antony, to show that it's the same human being, but bring him up under a republic and he looks one way, bring him up under an empire and he looks another way. I think that's in a way, the thesis, the political thesis of these plays. So what we'll be looking at now is how life changes under an empire, how the poetry changes. Again, for Coriolanus, poetry is, "You common cry of curs, whose breath I hate, as reek of the fens, I banish you." Not, "Look at the clouds, man. Look at the clouds. They're ever changing." Just a reminder, this is now the Roman Empire, a very different world. As I've said several times, when you picture Rome, you're picturing the Roman Empire. You don't quite realize that, but all those buildings are imperial. The Colosseum was built on the ruins of Nero's palace. Emperor Hadrian built the Pantheon. All those famous baths, it's the baths of Diocletian and the baths of Caracalla. The forums were built there's the Forum of Augustus Caesar, the Forum of Trajan. All these famous buildings are imperial. There's almost nothing left of Republican Rome. The walls of Rome are 4th century AD, the Aurelian walls that still stand. Again, Octavius famously said, "I found Rome a city of mud and bricks and left it a city of marble." So all that grandeur of Rome is imperial, and it was very much in the Roman consciousness, this contrast, the idea that early Republican Rome was poor and simple. This is in Virgil's Aeneid, which is a book that expressed Rome's sense of itself, or maybe tried to shape it. It's a book written in the early days of Octavius's reign as Roman emperor, and was trying to establish a basis for it, give propaganda for it. I'll read you a couple of passages, one from Book 8 of the Aeneid. When Aeneas has come to the ground that will eventually become the city of Rome. The scorching sun has scaled the city's mid-circle when they can see far off the citadel and walls and scattered rooftops that today the power of Rome has raised as high as heaven, but then it was Evander's, a poor land. Virgil is writing from the beginnings of imperial Rome, suggesting how grand the city is in its day, and reminding his audience that Rome was just a minor village when it began, and later, with such talk to each other, they drew near a poor man's house, the home of King Evander, and here and there the cattle lowed along what are today the elegant Carinae and Roman Forum. This amazing passage, basically saying this was once just farmland. Where Rome now stands, where the great city of Rome, the imperial city I live in, with all its magnificent forums and other buildings, that was once cow pasture. Little did Virgil know that 1,500 years later it would become cow pasture again. But this sense, again, I want how poor Rome is in the days of Coriolanus. I mean, it's subject to famine. You've got all these poor people around. But now we're in a very different world, and Shakespeare makes an effort to convey a sense of how vast this Roman Empire is now. He has not done that. Obviously, he didn't do it in Coriolanus because there was no Roman Empire yet. They're still facing off against a bunch of Volscians. By Julius Caesar's time, the Republican armies, under leaders like Caesar, had conquered the whole of the Mediterranean world and had put together most of what was to become the Roman Empire, though emperors kept adding to the empire up until Trajan, I believe. But in any case, even Julius Caesar is largely set in Rome. The final battles are off in the east in what's now Greece, but still the sense is Rome is still focused in the city of Rome. But in Antony and Cleopatra, it's very difficult to locate the city of Rome anymore. There's not a single scene that can be definitively placed within the city. In both Coriolanus and Julius Caesar, Shakespeare very carefully puts in references to well-known geographic spots in Rome, like the Capitol and the Senate and the Forum and the Tarpeian Rock. I've searched this play, and although some scenes undoubtedly take place in Rome, though fewer than the city of Rome, though fewer than you might think, those that do take place in private residences, there are no longer any references to the civic geography of Rome in this play. You know, in Coriolanus, they swear by the coin of yon capital, which still stands there today, but nothing like that in this play. In fact, this play tries to give us a sense of the enormous extent now of the Roman Empire. So we get passages like page 73. This would be Act 3, Scene 6, where we learn that from Octavius that Mark Antony has given all these lands to Cleopatra. Unto her he gave the establishment of Egypt, made her of Lower Syria, Cyprus, Lydia, absolute queen. And then a little further down, still Act 3, Scene 6. His sons he there proclaimed the kings of kings, great Medea, Parthia, and Armenia he gave to Alexander. To Ptolemy he assigned Syria, Cilicia, and Phoenicia. And the names go on, like a lesson in imperial geography. Page 75. So still Act 3, Scene 6, about line 66. Antony's levying the kings of the earth for war. He hath assembled Bacchus, the king of Libya, Archelaus of Cappadocia, Philadelphos, king of Paphlagonia, the Thracian king Adalas, King Mauchus of Arabia, king of Pont, Herod of Jewry, Mithridates, king of Commagene, Polemon and Amyntas, the kings of Mede and Lycaonia. Place filled with geographic names to suggest how large Rome has become. And indeed, that's the greatness of the empire, but it also suggests the fundamental idea here that Rome has become decentered. In Coriolanus and Julius Caesar, Rome is the focus of Rome. The city of Rome is the focus of the larger entity, Rome. But now, things are indistinct as Rome is in Rome. As water is in water and as Rome is in Rome. The city of Rome as a distinct entity seems to have dissolved into the larger empire. That sense we had of Rome as a city with walls around it, with specific points of reference, that has dissolved here. You cannot even pinpoint Rome in this play. The city of Rome is not the center of this play anymore. Indeed, the whole sense is that the center of the Roman Empire has shifted to the east, which had indeed happened at this point and culminated in 330 AD when the Emperor Constantine moved the Roman capital from Rome to Byzantium, the city that he modestly renamed Constantinople. Shakespeare has a real sense of that, the decentering of Rome here. And you can see it just in the opening scene. We've talked about the parallelism of the opening scenes of Coriolanus and Julius Caesar. There we saw street action in Rome. We saw the plebeians. We saw their tribunes in both Coriolanus and Julius Caesar. We saw either the patricians themselves or talk of the patricians. In that context, the opening scene of Antony and Cleopatra is really striking. There's no plebeians. There's no tribunes. They've been killed off. And indeed, we are in a decadent Eastern court here. We are in the empire, in a full imperial court. It hasn't taken very long for this to happen. But here, this is page 4. So Act 1, Scene 1. What are we, with the beginning of Coriolanus and Antony and Cleopatra, we are seeing people talking politics. Now they're talking love. Line 13, if it be love indeed, tell me how much. There's beggary in the love that can be reckoned. I'll set a bourne, how far to be beloved. Then must thou needs find out new heaven, new earth. We're going to talk a lot about these lines over the next 3 lectures, but just preliminarily I'll say something's happened here. If you want to talk Roman decadence, here it is. Here is one of these super luxurious, sensually indulgent courts. We're going to find it's peopled by eunuchs and dancing girls and everything we picture when we think of Roman decadence. And top of page 5, so about line 33, what does Antony say? Let Rome and Tiber melt. Again, melting. And the wide arch of the rangered empire fall. Again, the city that yet distinctly ranges for Commodius, now it's falling. Let Rome and Tiber melt. Rome dissolve into water. That's a river, the Tiber. Here is my space. Kingdoms are clay. Our dungy earth alike feeds beast as man. The nobleness of life is to do thus, when such a mutual pair and such a twain can do it, in which I bind on pain of punishment the world to wheat, we stand up peerless. So from the very beginning, we learn that nobility is going to be redefined in the world of this play. Nobility in the Republic was politics, and valor was the chiefest virtue. Something else is going on here. The nobleness of life is to do thus. Now, in polite company, I cannot say what thus is, but guess, and it's what Antony and Cleopatra are doing, as his own soldiers point out. So life has shifted to eros now. The focus, he rejects politics, focuses on eros, though notice a peculiarity here. He does not simply reject the political world, because he actually passes a law here, on which I bind on pain of punishment. He's going to bind people on pain of punishment. That would be like, the world to wheat we stand up peerless. This is why you have to redefine nobleness here, because he still wants to be famous, he still wants to be noble, he still wants to be looked up to. It'll be for a different reason. People will look up to him as a lover, not a fighter. But still, notice that he still wants the world focused on him. Again, a lot of people read this play as if it's just giving up politics for love. If Antony and Cleopatra wanted to do that, there's a simple way. They could just abdicate and leave and go off and disappear into the multitude of people in the empire. But that's not what they do. They still want to be the famous. They still want to be the center of attention. In a way, they're going to remake politics so it becomes something erotic and in which they can still stand out. Again, I'm going to spend a lot of time developing that idea, but I want you to notice it here from the beginning. So, any questions thus far? Let's see. Okay, what I want to do then is take a few representative moments and really focus for you the way the world has changed here. And let me begin with page 70. This is a difficult moment for Octavia. So this is Act 3, Scene 4. Remember, she's now married to Antony. Her brother is Octavius, and now it looks as if Octavius and Antony are on a collision course in a form of civil war. And Octavia, this is line 15 on the bottom of our page 70. The good gods will mock me presently when I shall pray, "Oh, bless my lord and husband." Undo that prayer by crying out as lad, "Oh, bless my brother." Husband win brother, praise and destroys the pair. No midway twixt these extremes at all. It's a very difficult situation. She's torn between her love for her brother, a family tie, and her love for her husband, a romantic tie. Notice that line, no midway twixt these extremes at all. As I said, moderation was at least the hope of the Republic, to find a middle way. Things were often very strained. People like Coriolanus fly off the handle, but there is a sense in which temperately to proceed was the foundational notion of the Republic, and at the cost of Coriolanus, in the play, Rome achieves a form of compromise. What's interesting in this play is the midway seems to have dropped out, and indeed it produces extremes now. Now, I can make the point neatly by, again, referring to Coriolanus here. You can look it up on page 135. It's on page 135, so Act 5, Scene 3, about line 105. This is a very similar moment. This is when Volumnia comes to ask Coriolanus to give up his plan to destroy Rome, and she says, "For how can we, alas, how can we for our country pray, whereto we are bound, together with thy victory, whereto we are bound? Alack, or we must lose the country, our dear nurse, or else thy person, our comfort in the country. We must find an evident calamity, though we had our wish, which side should win." So on the surface of things, it looks like a parallel situation, this terrible dilemma. Now for Volumnia, if you, Coriolanus, win, our country is destroyed. If our country is preserved, you, our son, are lost. But notice the difference in the dilemma. Octavius is torn between two personal loyalties, her loyalty to her brother and her loyalty to her husband. Volumnia is torn between loyalty to her country and loyalty to her son. So torn between a patriotic duty and a personal tie. Therefore, she can resolve her dilemma and comes out firmly on the side of the city of Rome and is willing to reject her son, even to deny her son in favor of Rome. I mention this because you can see the difference here that in the Republic, there's still a notion of a common good, of a public good, patriotism, the good of the city, which trumps any private loyalty. Brutus was still claiming that in Act 3. Not that I loved Caesar less, but I loved Rome more. By the end of the play, he's beginning to turn to pure personal loyalty, and we see the consequences. Antony and Cleopatra is now a world of personal loyalties. Very little talk of Roman good anymore, and this is characteristic of the empire. By the way, I'll just pause here because both these speeches help illustrate a very important notion of tragedy. We're not going to talk too much about theory of tragedy in this course. I'm guessing many of you are familiar with Aristotle, but I would like to call attention to the great alternate theory of tragedy. How many of you have read Aristotle's Poetics or somehow familiar with it? Okay, well, how many have read Hegel's Aesthetics? All right, it's almost a tie for once. Anyway, Hegel has a theory of tragedy which is based on the notion of a tragic situation. That is, for Hegel, a tragic situation is just like we've outlined here, where someone is torn between two goods, where, for example, you have to choose between your brother and your husband, or you have to choose between your son and your country. That is a quintessentially tragic situation for Hegel. Essentially what he argues is in a situation where it's just good and evil, that's melodrama, it's not really perplexing, it's not really that interesting. But Hegel sees what makes tragedy profound is it deals with situations where we are forced to recognize the deep incompatibility of goods that we normally think are compatible. His example of tragedy is Sophocles' Antigone. Some of you may know that, where Antigone's brother is disloyal to Thebes. He's executed as a traitor, but she feels an obligation to bury him as a kinsman. And indeed, it's a classic tragedy where Antigone is torn between her loyalty to her city Thebes and her loyalty to her brother Polynices, and the situation works out tragically. I bring this up because I think this is a very profound understanding of tragedy, and we're going to be using it particularly when we get to Hamlet, Othello, and Macbeth. But this is such a perfect moment to illustrate it, where Shakespeare is very often in Shakespeare, the Hegelian tragic conflict is between some kind of public loyalty and some kind of private loyalty. And you see it throughout these Roman plays. People are being torn apart between their loyalty to something political like the Roman Republic and their friendships. Again, you see it with Brutus's attitude towards Caesar. Anyway, that's a larger point, but very specifically, I think if you keep these two scenes with Octavia and Volumnia in mind, you'll see how the terms of the game have changed in Republican Rome, in Imperial Rome. The city offered a principle for resolving divided loyalties that's now absent, where all the loyalties are on the same level. They're all personal loyalties. Any questions about that? Okay, let's turn to another scene that I think really helps spotlight the new world of the Republic, of the Empire. It's page 62. I'm spending a good bit of time on this. So 62 to 63, Act 3, Scene 1. This scene with Ventidius. This scene is normally omitted. I've never seen it in any production of the play, and there's two movies of the play. They omit it as well. It really is a very important scene. Shakespeare added it. It does nothing to advance the dramatic action. Specifically, I think Shakespeare really thought this was important. What we're seeing here is a Roman captain on the frontier. He has just defeated the Parthians. Parthians come up a lot at this point in Roman history. They were the last viable enemy of Rome, and especially a threat to Rome in the east. As you can see in this play, a lot of Roman wealth is now concentrated in the eastern Mediterranean, in places like Egypt, and the Parthians are kind of coming out of what's now Persia, I guess, what's now Iran and Iraq, I guess. And the Romans had fought them. Marcus Crassus, one of the first triumvirate, that is a partner of Julius Caesar and Pompey, had led an army and lost to the Parthians and indeed been killed in Parthia. A very difficult loss for Rome to swallow. Great Roman was killed. The Roman army lost its standards. I can't possibly convey to you how important that was to them. That even if you lost a battle, you had to retrieve your flag, and they spent years trying to recover those standards. And I think Ventidius has just done it. So this is a big deal. And you wouldn't have noticed, but the Parthians are mentioned a lot in this play. And this, his men think this is a great moment. The stage direction even says Ventidius enters, as it were, in triumph. And Silius thinks this is great and wants him to pursue the fleeing Parthians, spur through Media, Mesopotamia, and the shelters whither the routed fly. So thy grand captain Antony shall set thee on triumphant chariots and put garlands on thy head. In other words, you can earn a triumph now. And we saw, in fact, how important the triumph is in Coriolanus and in the opening of Julius Caesar. It was a big deal when you could win a battle, and a big battle. It really showed how big it was when the Senate voted you a triumph, that you got to, it's like a ticker tape parade in a way. You got to ride through Rome with everybody cheering. We've seen that scene, opening scene of Julius Caesar, second act of Coriolanus, when the whole city turns out to welcome you and you display all the stuff you won. But look what Ventidius says. O Silius, this is the top of page 63, so about line 10. O Silius, I have done enough. A lower place, note well, may make too great an act. For learn this, Silius, better to leave undone than by our deed acquire too high a fame when him we serves away. Caesar and Antony have ever won more in their officer than person. Sosius, one of my place in Syria, his lieutenant, for a quick accumulation of renown, which he achieved by the minute, lost his favor. who does in the wars more than his captain can, becomes his captain's captain, and ambition, the soldier's virtue, rather makes choice of loss than gain which darkens him. I could do more to do Antonius good, but 'twould offend him, and his offense should my performance perish. You see here how fundamentally the principles of the Republic have been overthrown. The Republic did everything it could to encourage the ambitious Romans to strive to earn triumphs. It's how you became consul. We've seen that in Coriolanus. Everything was tilted towards the guy on the way up, to spur people to be as ambitious militarily as possible. Now, I'm going to recall the corresponding moment in Coriolanus for you. Again, you can look it up. It's pages 13 to 14. Again, I want to show you how different these two worlds are. So it's Act 1, Scene 1 of Outline 260. This is that moment at the end of the first scene, Act 1, Scene 1. When Coriolanus has been appointed to serve under Cominius, and Sicinius wonders about it. It's line 262 in Act 1, Scene 1. But I do wonder his insolence can brook to be commanded under Cominius. And indeed we might wonder, why would an ambitious man like Coriolanus accept second in command? Brutus understands, fame at the which he aims, in whom already he's well graced, cannot better be held, nor more attained than by a place below the first. For what miscarries shall be the general's fault, though he perform to the utmost of a man, and giddy censure will then cry out of Marcius, oh, if he had borne the business. Now Sicinius picks up on it. Besides, if things go well, opinion that so sticks on Marcius shall of his demerits rob Cominius. Come, half all Cominius' honors are to Marcius, though Marcius earn them not, and all his faults to Marcius shall be honors, though indeed in aught he merits not. Mirror images here. In the Republic, the advantage goes to the subordinate, to the second in command. The idea, if he wins a battle, he'll get the credit for it, but if he loses, his boss will be blamed. Notice it's just the opposite now in the empire. Ventidius knows if he wins the battle, Antony's going to get all the credit, and if something goes wrong, he'll have to take the blame. So why should he push himself under these circumstances? You can see how differently the military hierarchy functions in the empire. And this is something Machiavelli talks about, again, to kind of inspire you to be working on your papers. Let me read you a fairly long passage from Machiavelli. Again, I'm asking you to read Machiavelli because I think it will give you a larger sense of Roman history and also show you how much Republican thinking was going on at the time. Again, I wish we could spend time on Machiavelli directly, but there's so much to cover in the Shakespeare, but still, I think you'll get a lot out of reading it. This is Book 1, Chapter 30 of the Discourses, which modes a prince or a republic should use so as to avoid the vice of ingratitude. And he talks about just the situation Ventidius is in. So as to avoid the necessity of either having to live with suspicion or of being ungrateful, a prince should go personally on expeditions as the Roman emperors did in the beginning, as the Turk does in our times, and as those who are virtuous have done and do. Mark Antony is violating that principle. He's not leading his own army here. He's letting Ventidius do it, and Machiavelli points out that a lot of emperors did that. For if they win, the glory and the acquisition are all theirs, if the emperor's leading his own army. And when they're not present, since the glory is someone else's, it does not appear to them that they can make use of the acquisition unless they eliminate in someone else the glory that they have not known how to gain for themselves. They become ungrateful and unjust. And he says, if you're not leading your own armies and they win, you're in trouble as the prince. And by the same token, he warns the successful general, either leave the army at once after the victory and put himself in the hands of his prince, guarding himself against every insolent or ambitious act. This is just what Ventidius does. So that the latter, the prince, deprived of every suspicion, may have cause either to reward him or not to offend him. When this does not appear improper, he may, that is, if you're not going to act humble after a victory as a subordinate, then you spiritedly take the contrary part and hold to all these modes through which he believes that the acquisition may be his own and not his prince's, making the soldiers and the subjects well disposed to him. He's basically, Machiavelli's advice to Ventidius here would be, do what you're doing, act humble, or if not, go for the jugular. Depose Antony right now. Use this army to overthrow Antony. And Machiavelli goes on to contrast this with the Republic. This is a passage I read to you, part of it before. To a republic wishing to avoid this vice of the ungrateful, one can't give the same remedy as to the prince, that is to go and not send someone else on its expedition, since it is under necessity to send one of its citizens. It is fitting, therefore, that I propose this remedy, that it follow the same modes the Roman Republic followed, so as to be less ungrateful than the others. This arose from the modes of its government. For since the whole city, both the nobles and the ignobles, was put to work in war, so many virtuous men emerged on every age, decorated from various victories, that the people did not have cause to fear any one of them, since they were very many and guarded one another. So there you have it. Again, under the Roman Republic, the whole system was geared to giving the advantage to the second in command. That meant the ambition of a large number of people could be satisfied, and you had a lot of able commanders who could check and balance each other. You see how things are changing under the empire, where there's one man at top. At the moment, there's two men at top. By the end of the play, there'll be only one man at the top. But that's so different a system where now the one man at the top has to worry all the time when he sees a successful soldier, whether that guy is going to be out to get him. Now, again, this is a case where Shakespeare's source is revealing here. This is in the source. If you got the signet, you can turn to page 165. There's no question that Ventidius caught Shakespeare's eye. He's a fairly prominent figure in the Plutarch's life of Mark Antony. No one today cares about him, but this is the last paragraph on 165. Again, I want you to see what's in the source and what Shakespeare adds. In the meantime, Ventidius once again overcame Pacorus, Orty's son, king of Parthia, in a battle fought in the country of Cyrestica, he being come again with a great army to invade Syria, at which battle was slain a great number of the Parthians, and among them Pacorus, the king's own son, slain. This noble exploit, as famous as ever any was a full revenge to the Romans of the shame and loss they had received before by the death of Marcus Crassus. So you see, it was a very important military victory, because for one thing, it avenged a Roman defeat. And the Romans did not like being defeated. They occasionally were. Whenever they were, they made sure to defeat the guy that defeated them 10 times over. And he made the Parthians fly and glad to keep themselves within the confines and territories of Mesopotamia and Media, after they had thrice together been overcome in several battles. However, Ventidius durst not undertake to follow them any further, fearing lest he should have gotten Antonius' displeasure by it. Ventidius was the only man that ever triumphed of the Parthians until his present day. He indeed did get a triumph for this in Rome. Shakespeare omits that fact because he wants to stress how limited the options were for the subordinates. In fact, Ronald Syme, in discussing this point, Ventidius probably came from a conquered people. He probably started as a slave and became a Roman general. And Syme says he may be the only person ever to have been paraded in a triumph through the streets of Rome and later got to lead a triumph through Rome. He's actually a fairly famous figure, and Shakespeare picks up on that, but none of the producers of the plays do. Anyway, Ventidius was the only man that ever triumphed of the Parthians until this present day, a mean man born and of no noble house nor family, who only came to that he attained through Antonius' friendship, which delivered him happy occasion to achieve to great matters. So this guy is a Roman success story, the classic Roman success story. Comes up from humble origins, becomes a great general, wins one of the greatest victories in Roman military history. And yet to say truly, he did so well acquit himself in all his enterprises that he confirmed that which was spoken of Antonius and Caesar, to wit, that they were always more fortunate when they made war by their lieutenants than by themselves. For Sosius, one of Antonius's lieutenants in Syria, did notable good service, and Canidius, whom he had also left as lieutenant in the borders, did conquer it all. Notice in Plutarch, we simply hear that Sosius did good service, whereas in Shakespeare, we hear Sosius, one of my places in Syria's lieutenant, for quick accumulation of renown, which he achieved by men, lost his favor. Plutarch never says that. Shakespeare, Plutarch says Ventidius did eventually get his triumph in Rome. All he says of Sosius is that he accomplished a lot. Shakespeare, you can see him shaping the incident to stress this point. Ventidius is the kind of man absolutely who would have become consul in the Republic. He's another Coriolanus. He's another one of these great generals. The Republic had room for him at the top. Because remember, 2 consuls at any given moment, and the consuls change every year. Now that slowed down in the late days of the Republic, but still, as I think, they would count how many living consuls there were, and there often would be 45 living people who had been consul in Rome at any given moment. An empire is very different. There's room for only one man at the top. And so politics is changing here. The motives are changing. There's much less reward now for military success. So much so that back on page 63, and we're going to be exploring this line for the next 2.5 lectures, line 23, an ambition, the soldier's virtue, rather makes choice of loss than gain which darkens him. Where the hell did that come from? Can you imagine Coriolanus defining the soldier's virtue as choice of loss? That is so un-Republican. Something has really changed here, that an ambitious Roman general is now saying, I'm going to choose to lose. Because if I win too big, Antony's going to do away with me. That's really where you see the transformation of Roman politics here. And remember what we saw in Brutus at the end of Julius Caesar. I shall have glory by this losing day, more than Antony and Caesar by this vile conquest. We're starting to enter a world of losers now in this play. The empire is for losers, because winning brings you into conflict with the one man on the throne. And so there really is some strange notions aboard in this play, which you can see, for example, on page 131, where Cleopatra says, this is Act 5, Scene 2, line 2, "'Tis paltry to be Caesar." Man, that happened fast. The Roman Empire has just come into existence, and already people are going around saying it's paltry to be Caesar. I mean, this was the noblest man that ever strode in the tide of times, according to Mark Antony. But remember, in that connection, what Mark Antony said, this is back in Julius Caesar, you can look it up, it's on page 52, Act 3, Scene 1, about line 150, "O mighty Caesar, dost thou lie so low? Are all thy conquests, glories, triumphs, spoils shrunk to this little measure? 'Tis paltry to be Caesar." In other words, here's the continuity I'm trying to point to you in these plays, and how all of this grows out of Julius Caesar. There's an enormous disillusionment in politics here. You might think at first, wow, emperor, that's better than consul. Consul, 1-year term, there's another consul. You go to a party and everybody else is a consul. You think, oh, great, I'm going to a party, I'll be the only consul there. But there's 27 consuls in front of you on the receiving line. But you're emperor. Wow, there's only one emperor. But you see what's happened here. At the same time as the office grows bigger, the sense of honor with it grows smaller. For one thing, the big deal of being a consul was to be honored by your fellow consuls. It's a real sense you see in Coriolanus, the camaraderie between Cominius and Coriolanus. You had this sense that it was wonderful to be the executive in Rome because other noble people had done it or were doing it or would do it, and the honor came by reflection. Now there's this sense in this play that, it's you're emperor, but you're now emperor over slaves, and there's no honor to it. And in fact, page 58, in a way, Shakespeare gives us a gripping image of what imperial politics is and will be. This is Act 2, Scene 7, when Minos and Pompey are on the ship, and they have the Lepidus, Octavius, and Antony there, and Minos, this is about line 60 in Act 2, Scene 7, "Wilt thou be lord of all the world?" And he has to ask him several times. I mean, this is what it is to be emperor. Great deal, to be the earthly Jove and all this. And the answer is, I'll kill Lepidus, Octavius, and Antony for you. And Pompey can't accept that. This is line 75. "Ah, this thou shouldst have done, and not have spoken on it. In me 'tis villainy, indeed it had been good service. Thou must know 'tis not my profit does lead mine honor it. Repent that ere thy tongue has so betrayed thine act. Being done unknown, I should have found it afterwards well done, but must condemn it now." It's a very difficult moment for Pompey and certainly for Minos, but what we see is politics has become crime now in the empire. The nature of the Republic was that it allowed people legitimate modes to power. And it didn't allow everybody. A woman wasn't going to become consul, a slave wasn't going to become consul. For a long time, a plebeian wasn't going to become consul. But still, there was a notion, most ambitious men, genuinely ambitious men, could aspire to become consul. Plebeians could aspire to become tribune. There were legitimate outlets where you could follow a certain path and expect to be honored. Now, you got one emperor, potentially for 50 years. In 50 years, you could have had 100 different consuls. It didn't actually work out that way because people could repeat after that. But still, potentially 50 years, 100 consuls. Potentially 50 years, one emperor. Now, in fact, they had 4 emperors in 1 year because they kept killing them. Shakespeare is quite, I think he invents this scene entirely. It's not in Plutarch. I think he understood that assassination was going to become a major political tool in the empire. Indeed, it's true. I don't know what the percentages are, but a very high percentage of Roman emperors were killed, usually by the army. They couldn't stand them anymore. Nero, Caligula, and so on. And so we see here a kind of corruption of politics, a kind of poisoning of the highest position, that it's going to come to us, come to someone only through crime. Again, that was so true of the history of the Roman Empire. But Shakespeare doesn't give the Roman Empire a break. I mean, it was, he really gives you a very negative sense of the Roman Empire from the beginning. Augustus was a pretty good emperor, that is Octavius, who became Augustus, but Shakespeare shows the notion of empire is corrupt at the core. Politics is crime here in an imperial system. Now, in fact, Shakespeare exaggerates the change that occurred at this point from republic to empire. I think he does it in full knowledge of what was happening. He wants to emphasize the contrast. But it's quite striking what has dropped out of the play. The consuls are mentioned once. The word consuls comes up only once. It's on page 21. So Act 1, Scene 4, about line 57. But Caesar is here, Octavius is here, telling about Antony's past, this battle at Modena, where thou slewest Hirtius and Pansa, consuls. The consuls are mentioned only to tell us they're dead. And indeed, it's arguable that these two guys, Hirtius and Pansa, were the last Republican consuls, the last that even resembled being appointed consuls by a legitimate Republican procedure. How about the senators? They're mentioned on page 49. This is Act 2, Scene 6, where Pompey says, line 8, to you all three, the senators alone of this great world, chief factors for the gods. Well, there the word senators appears, but it's obviously been transformed because it refers to the second triumvirate. He's referring here only to Lepidus, Mark Antony, and Octavius Caesar, as if there were no more Roman Senate. Now, in fact, historically, there was a Roman Senate still. Roman Senate well into the 5th century till Rome itself dissolved. That is, Shakespeare virtually eliminates all the elements of continuity between the Republic and the Empire. I should say there's a very good book on this subject by a classical historian named Ronald Syme, and it's called The Roman Revolution. It's long, very detailed, but I do recommend it. He argues that Octavius's genius was to maintain the illusion of continuity between the Republic and the Empire, so that, for example, the institution of consuls, the institution of tribunes were still there. I mean, what Octavius did was have himself appointed consul, have himself appointed tribune, have his friends appointed consul. Octavius tried very hard to maintain continuity, to conceal the fact that Rome was now being ruled by one man. He did not have himself called king. He had himself called princeps, which is from the word from which we get prince, but the feeling of that then was first among equals. You know, I'm just, the majority leader of the Roman Senate. I'm not your king. And he did all sorts of things. I'm the tribune, I'm your consul, and all that. And it's interesting to see, again, we can, using Shakespeare's sources here, we can see this happening. If you turn to page 73, look at, so this is Act 3, Scene 6, about line 19. We just had this long speech, some of which I read, about all the terrible things Antony is doing in the East. And Maecenas, Octavius's lackey, says, this is line 19, let Rome be thus informed. And it's very interesting if you go to the original Plutarch here. It's not in your excerpts, but I'll read it to you from a full version of the life. At the exact same point, we've just had the talk about kings of Cyprus, of Lydia, and Lower Syria, and kings of kings and all that. Octavius Caesar reporting all these things unto the Senate, and oftentimes accusing Antony to the whole people assembling in Rome, he thereby stirred up all the Romans against him. Shakespeare changes that to the very vague, let Rome be thus informed. Here as elsewhere, he omits every reference to the Senate in Plutarch. And again, the Senate as an institution survived, and you would never know that from reading Shakespeare's plays. Now, I do not believe this is ignorance on Shakespeare's part, because you can actually see him working to delete the word Senate where it appears in Plutarch's account. Again, I think for dramatic purposes, he's trying to make this break look sharper than it actually was, or undermine Octavius's efforts to give the impression of continuity. It's really quite sharp what's dropped out here. And last, and perhaps most important, is the plebeians. I kind of spoiled this for you by telling you you'd never see him again after Act 3 of Julius Caesar. And indeed you don't. There's only, the word plebeians appears only one time in this play. And think how important the plebeians were in Coriolanus and Julius Caesar. They were a deciding factor. This is page 115, Act 4, Scene 12, about line 33. vanish, or shall give thee thy deserving and blemished Caesar's triumph. Let him take thee and hoist thee up to the shouting plebeians. That is the only time the word plebeians appears in this play, and notice that they have become spectators, just as I promised you. Their only function now is to be there for Caesar's triumph, and they'll shout applause. They have obviously lost their active role in history. It's kind of interesting that Pompey doesn't quite get it. Look at bottom of page 27. This is Act 2, Scene 1, about line 9. I shall do well, the people love me. Oh no, it doesn't matter at all what the people think now. Pompey is a leftover from Republican Rome. He, in fact, is the only one who speaks Republican rhetoric. Look at page 49. This is Act 2, 3, and 6, when he's explaining why he's come here. Line 10, so Act 2, Scene 6, line 10. I do not know wherefore my father should revenge his want, having a son and friends, since Julius Caesar, who at Philippi the good Brutus ghosted, there saw you laboring from. What was it that moved pale Cassius to conspire, and what made all honored, honest Roman Brutus with the armed rest, courtiers of beauty's freedom to drench the Capitol, but that they would have one man, but a man, and that it is, hath made me rig my navy. This is the last gasp of Republican rhetoric. You do not hear it anywhere else in the play. This is someone appealing to Republican principle, the very idea that Cassius stood up for, have one man but a man. It's amazing how little of that remains here, and indeed it turns out that Pompey is just a blowhard here. He's ready to make a deal. He even says, I came here ready to make a deal. Cut me in on the action, and to hell with Republican principle. But it's the last gasp here. And of course, the plebeians, they're referred to 2 more times here on page 134, where Cleopatra worries. This is Act 5, Scene 2. About line 55, shall they hoist me up and show me to the shouting varletry of centuring Rome? That's the plebeians. And finally, 140, so Act 5, Scene 2, Cleopatra again complaining about what will happen if they're brought to Rome. Thou, an Egyptian puppet, shall be shown in Rome as well as I. What I want you to see is just what I promised you. The plebeians are now just spectators. Mechanic slaves with greasy aprons, rules, and hammers shall uplift us to the view. In their thick breaths, rank of gross diet, shall we be enclouded and forced to drink their vapor. By the way, Shakespeare must have had an obsession with bad breath. Just try to picture how bad breath was in the Elizabethan times. You know anything about British teeth and what they must have looked like before dentistry and what they ate. And Shakespeare was an actor. He'd be up on that stage. The waves of bad breath must have been unbelievable because he has Coriolanus referred to it, he has Cleopatra referred to it. Those little touches of what Shakespeare went through to give us these great plays. Shall be forced to drink their vapors. And then she goes on to, picture herself being staged. The plebeians appear only as theatrical spectators in this play. That's so apt. They played their last role in the Republican regime in Act 3, and they essentially voted for slavery. They took their 75 drachmas and became slaves. Here's what I meant when I talked about the transformation from citizens to subjects. You can see it now. The Republic, for all its faults, was a world of citizens, where people, even the common people, had an active role in politics. Now this is a world of subjects. That's what empire means. There's one emperor and all these subjects. And we see the total transformation now. There are no, well, let me put it, there are vastly reduced outlets for ambition. under the empire. Now, in fact, the empire had all sorts of minor offices. They still had the aediles and the praetors and so on, and the quaestors and the censors, and whatever. So Shakespeare admits that he wants to make it look like an all-or-nothing proposition now, that one-man rule really is one-man rule. And that's got to discourage ambition or direct it into criminal channels. Under an imperial system, if you're not the son of the emperor, the way to become emperor is to kill him. And that does debase politics in another way. And in general, 'tis paltry to be Caesar in the world of this play. We see a massive debasement of politics here. And the flip side of that is this enormous encouragement to erotic life, to this new heaven, new earth of romantic love. Now, we're seeing a massive trade-off here. I've generally been talking in positive terms of the Republic, and in political terms, it's an impressive community, and I think Shakespeare really admires it. If you want political life, a Republican form of Commonwealth is the way to do it, and that's a great theme of Machiavelli. But as I mentioned before, there are enormous limitations in the Republic, precisely because it focuses people's attention so narrowly on politics. And we now see in this play that there are a lot of compensations for giving up the Republic. And Cleopatra is the great image of it in the play, that there are aspects of life that are very much discouraged in the empire, that are very much encouraged in the Republic. So even in the empire, so even a old Republican soldier like Enobarbus, this is page 12, Act 1, Scene 2, about line 155. When Antony says of Cleopatra, "Would I had never seen her, oh sir, you had then left unseen." A wonderful piece of work. And a lot of this play is about how wonderful that piece of work is. But you see there, that's the attitude of a traveler there. And the empire is so vast, and its range of experience is so wide. That's what differs now. The Republic produced those models of public life because it was so narrow, because it had a roof, and they weren't looking at the clouds to see strange pageants in the cloud. They were focused on the public life of the city. Crack that roof, expand the geographic range to span the whole Mediterranean, and you've got a fundamentally different kind of community, what we would call a multicultural community, a multi-civilizational community. And that shows up at all sorts of levels in the play. And let me talk about religion now, because we've been tracing the pattern of religion in these plays. We've talked about how in the Republic, the classic effort was to restrict the religion to civic purposes and to keep it under the control of the city as a whole. And things like soothsayers were frowned upon. And then we began to see in Julius Caesar greater prominence of soothsayers. Now, soothsayers are all over the place. It's like everybody has to have their own soothsayers. Soothsayers Are Us was very successful in Rome, and the I Sooth 5 was a big item in Rome. Now suddenly everyone's looking for a new angle, and look what form it takes. Page 6, we see these, so this is Act 1, Scene 2. This is Cleopatra's court, and it's dominated by a soothsayer. Most absolute Alexis is asked, where's the soothsayer? And he shows up in nature's infinite book of secrecy, a little I can read. And everybody wants to know their future. Now, I told you, again, this was a pattern we've been tracing through the plays. In Coriolanus, the characters think the future is something they're going to make themselves. And so they don't really obsess over getting prophecies of what's going to happen. But these characters are really worried about the future, and they ask for prophecies here. Charmian, line 25. We'll have to come back to this speech several times, but good now, some excellent fortune. Let me be married to 3 kings in a forenoon and widow them all. Let me have a child at 50 to whom Herod of Jewry may do homage. We've heard Herod twice already today. We're going to be hearing a lot from him over the next, especially in the third lecture. Find me to marry me with Octavius Caesar. And the soothsayer says, you shall outlive the lady whom you serve, which turns out to be true by a few minutes. But you see, these people are really wondering about their future, and what the soothsayer says is, you have seen and proved a fairer form of fortune than that which is to approach. And that is a very sad commentary on Rome. I think it is true of the Roman Empire, because Shakespeare sees the Roman Empire as a falling off from the Roman Republic. Remember the end of Julius Caesar, where the sun was setting. As the last of the great patricians who fought against Caesar's one-man rule died off, the impression was, this is the end of Rome. And that's basically what the soothsayer is saying here, that indeed for all these characters you have seen and proved a fair form of fortune than that which is to approach. One way of seeing it is that this is a late moment already in Roman history. It's the beginning of the empire, but the end of the republic. In Coriolanus, Shakespeare shows us effectively the Roman Republic at its beginning. When it's just starting to be a scrapper, beating the Volscians, but in the old Alexander the Great sense, Rome still has a lot of worlds to conquer at the moment of Coriolanus. Julius Caesar, Alexander famously wept when he had no more worlds to conquer. And Julius Caesar was obsessed with Alexander the Great and his conquest. And indeed, by Caesar's day, the Republican armies had conquered the whole of the Mediterranean world. Now, again, Caesar failed to conquer Britain, and under Augustus, Rome finally conquered Britain, and Trajan eventually conquered what's now Romania. And so, the Roman Empire peaked around the year 100 AD, and it was the Emperor Hadrian who finally made the decision, enough already. Let's build a wall in Britain. Let's stop this. Let's just hold what we've got on. But by and large, the empire was an enormous holding action. It tried to retain what the Republic had won. So again, the people are not obsessed with the future in Coriolanus because there's a real future for Rome there. And again, they expect to be the ones that make it. Fortune is for the followers, not for the flyers. There is a real world weariness in the world of this play because the characters have a strong sense of being latecomers and not having any more worlds to conquer. Indeed, it's an interesting point. As the play presents it, the Parthians are the last people left to conquer. Externally and internally, of course, the last task is for one of the 2 remaining triumvirs to conquer the others. So, page 98, Caesar says, this is Act 4, Scene 1, know that tomorrow the last of many battles we mean to fight. Well, that's pretty ominous for a military community. For most people, that would sound great. Wow, the last of many battles. But this is a community which for 5 centuries now has founded itself on the principle valor is the chiefest virtue and that military life is the highest form of life. And now we hear the last of many battles we mean to fight, or page 106, Caesar again, this is Act 4, Scene 6, line 5, the time of universal peace is near. Now that has all sorts of resonances that we'll examine in our third lecture, but what I want you to see is what sounds good to a normal community, universal peace, is pretty ominous for this community Rome, which has devoted itself so long for. Remember Marcius, little nasty Marcius, who played with those butterflies, and he let them go so he could go on chasing them and have something to do. Finally, he just killed the butterfly, and what was left to him now? And in a way, Rome is killing the butterfly in this play when ventidius defeats the Parthians, it's as if Rome has no enemies left. And so I think that's why, in a certain sense, they become obsessed with the future, because it's empty for them. And Antony has a soothsayer too. This is page 40. Act 2, scene 3. It's so funny. It's like standard equipment now. You travel with a manicurist and a hairdresser and a soothsayer. Just call up Ain't It the Sooth, and they send you a soothsayer for your trip. But see what Antony is obsessed with. This is Act 2, Scene 3, line 16. Say to me, whose fortune shall rise higher, Caesar's or mine? Caesar's. Therefore, O Antony, stay not by his side. Thy demon, that thy spirit which keeps thee, is noble, courageous, high, and matchable, where Caesar is not. And then he goes on to say, Caesar wins at any game. If thou dost play with him at any game, thou art sure to lose, and of that natural luck he beats thee against the odds. Notice now, it's no longer a matter of virtue to prevail, it's a matter of luck. And that's what strikes Antony. This is where he brings up Ventidius and Parthia, but line 34, the very dice obey him. In our sports, my better cunning faints under his chance, and we draw lots. He speeds, his cocks to win the battle still of mine, when it is all naught, and his quails ever beat mine in hooped at odds. And therefore, I'll go to Cleopatra. In the east, my pleasure lies. Ophidius never says, damn it, Coriolanus has all the luck. Every time we fight, he wins. Ophidius does not attribute that to luck. He attributes it to superiority as a warrior. And again, you see this transformation that's occurring here. This is a world of losers, and so they don't want to admit they might be lacking, so they say it's all luck. It's only luck that determines these things. If you look at page 143, this is Act 5, Scene 2. Cleopatra speaking of Caesar, line 285. I hear him mock the luck of Caesar, which the gods give men to excuse their after wrath. I think your gloss there is wrong. What she's saying is the gods give people luck, they succeed for a while, and then the gods dump on them and ruin them, so they excuse their after wrath by letting you be lucky and successful for a while. But in any case, we're now in a world where people's disposition is to attribute the success of others not to virtue but to luck. We're really in a world of passivity rather than activity now. We're instead of thinking, I should try harder. Octavius keeps beating me, I should try harder. But no, the idea here is, well, it's all just luck here, and so why should I care about it? So in general, there's a very different sense of the world here that's even reflected in the religion. There's there's 2 mentions of augury. They're still performing some of the old Roman practices. But the sense now is of a much more mysterious world in which the gods do not simply support human virtue, but just are arbitrary. Now again, the notion in Coriolanus was the gods help those who help themselves. Now look, a very interesting dialogue about the gods on page 27. It's the opening scene of Act 2. The detail of these plays is incredible. It's like Shakespeare. Everything is loaded up with showing us how this world has been transformed. This is no source, by the way. Shakespeare makes up this dialogue entirely. If the great gods be just, they shall assist the deeds of justice men. That's the old Republican principle. It's what we saw throughout Coriolanus. Menenius saying, we respected not them when we respected not Coriolanus, therefore the gods are going to punish us. Very strong sense of an identification between the city and the gods in the Republic. Though notice, if the great gods be just. Not sure of this, but I don't think there's any such formulation in Coriolanus or Julius Caesar. I may be wrong on that, but even to raise the possibility that the gods might not be just does not occur in that world. Now, again, it's in the context of saying, if the great gods be just, the premise is, yeah, sure, they're just. But even to put it that way shows a change here. If the great gods be just, they shall assist the deeds of justice men. Know, worthy Pompey, that what they do delay, they not deny. Okay, the gods may not appear to be just right now, but just wait. You're not getting what you think you deserve, but just wait, you'll get it. So that, just be patient. And Pompey rightly points out, whilst we are suitors to their throne, decays the thing we sue for. How long can I wait? I may be killed in the next scene. What good is the justice of the gods if it's delayed too long? And then Menocrates says, we, ignorant of ourselves, beg often our own harms, which the wise powers deny us for our good. So find we profit by losing of our prayers. Now, this really transforms and utterly mystifies the religious situation. Because what he's saying is the famous, beware of what you pray for. What he's saying is, you may think the gods are punishing you by denying you what you're praying for, but what you're praying for may not be for your good, and therefore the gods are really being nice to you when they deny you what's really not for your good. The wise powers deny us for our good. So find we profit by losing of our prayers. Another philosopher of losing here. Again and again, what you're seeing in this play is a transformation of the meaning of winning and losing, and the new lesson that losing is really winning. 'Tis paltry to be Caesar. You wanted to be Caesar. You prayed to the gods to make you Caesar. Well, do you realize how awful it is to be Caesar? Look what happened to Julius. He got hacked up in the Pompey's theater. But it's a much more mystifying world to the characters now, because it's really in Coriolanus it's clear cut. Winning is winning. Winning a battle is the greatest thing a Roman can do. It'll make you consul. Now these people don't know what winning is anymore. In fact, they're very much disposed to think again and again, choice of loss, that losing may be better than winning. That really is a remarkable overturning of Republican principle. So what I'm saying, this is not just a minor alteration of political form here or constitution. This is a transformative experience, and Shakespeare shows it operating on every level. Even the religion is different here. For one thing, it's not clear whether the religion is Roman anymore, because we got all these Egyptians, and we got people worshiping Isis. We got Cleopatra parading around as an Egyptian goddess. I'll stop with that, but I'll just say that next time we'll explore what we would call the multicultural or multi-civilizational character of the play, show how that is a consequence of empire, and show how it transforms the existence of these characters, that the world is just more complicated, as you see in religious terms, that there's not even a single Roman religion anymore, but you could be worshiping Isis or Jupiter or whatever. You could be worshiping a crocodile, as far as this play is concerned. So turn to that next time.